Japan isn't just cherry blossoms and Mount Fuji. Beneath the surface lies a geographic nightmare of tectonic chaos, disappearing islands, and landscapes that shouldn't exist. Fact 15. Japan sits on 4 tectonic plates, colliding simultaneously. Most countries sit on one tectonic plate, maybe 2 if they're unlucky. Japan sits where 4 major plates, the Pacific, Philippine Sea, Eurasian, and North American, collide in a geological demolition derby. The Pacific plate subducts beneath the North American plate at about 3 inches per year, while the Philippine Sea plate pushes under the Eurasian plate from the south. This creates the most seismically active zone on Earth, and Japan experiences over 1,500 earthquakes annually that people can actually feel. The plates don't slide smoothly. They stick together, building pressure for decades, then suddenly release in massive earthquakes. The 2011 Tohoku quake shifted Japan's main island 8 feet east in minutes, accomplishing what normally takes centuries. Fact 14. Japan has over 6,000 islands, but only 430 are inhabited. Japan's territory includes 6,852 islands scattered across 1,800 miles of ocean, from subtropical Okinawa to subarctic Hokkaido. Most are tiny, uninhabited rocks that appear and disappear with tides and storms, extending Japan's maritime territory across vast stretches of the Pacific. The government surveys islands regularly because volcanic activity and coastal erosion constantly change the total. Only 430 have permanent populations, and many have fewer than 100 residents, mostly elderly people in fishing villages. The Izu Islands, south of Tokyo, include active volcanoes too dangerous for permanent settlement because volcanic gases make the air toxic. Aogashima is a volcanic island where 170 people live inside a caldera, making it one of the world's most dangerous inhabited places. Fact 13. 73% of Japan is mountains and impossible to build on. Japan is one of the most mountainous countries on Earth, with 73% covered by steep mountains, where building cities is nearly impossible. The Japanese Alps through central Honshu contain over 20 peaks exceeding 9,800 feet, dividing Japan into distinct regions with different climates. Most Japanese people live in narrow coastal plains, just 27% of the land, creating some of Earth's highest population densities. Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya sit on the few flat areas available, housing over 100 million people combined. The mountains aren't just steep, they're unstable, carved into deep valleys where landslides regularly bury roads and villages. The lack of flat land shaped Japanese history. Rice farming required terracing hillsides, and mountains isolated regions into distinct feudal domains for centuries. Fact 12. Japan moves 4 inches closer to America every year. The Pacific Plate moves westward at 3 to 4 inches annually, carrying Japan slowly toward North America. GPS measurements confirm Japan's position shifts measurably every year. The movement isn't smooth. Plates stick together, accumulating strain, then suddenly release in earthquakes that move entire islands several feet in seconds. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake shifted the Oshika Peninsula 17 feet east in 90 seconds, what normally takes 50 years. Geologists trace Japan's journey by studying rock ages. In 100 million years, Japan will eventually collide with the Kamchatka Peninsula or Alaska, creating new mountain ranges. Fact 11. Japan has an entire lost island that disappeared in 2018. Isanbe Hanakita Kojima was a tiny island off Hokkaido that appeared on maps and marked Japan's maritime boundary. In 2018, surveyors discovered it had vanished. Erosion and wave action had worn it below the waterline. Its disappearance shifted Japan's maritime boundary inward, costing the country several square miles of ocean territory and fishing rights. Japan has since identified over 400 unnamed islands needing protection. If they erode below sea level, Japan loses maritime territory. The government now monitors critical boundary islands and considers building protective barriers around rocks that mark territorial limits. Sea level rise threatens to erase dozens more. Fact 10. The Japan Trench is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. The Japan Trench reaches 29,527 feet, deeper than Mount Everest's 29,032 feet. Place Everest inside it, and the peak would still be underwater. The trench forms where the Pacific Plate subducts beneath the North American Plate, creating a gash nearly 6 miles deep. This subduction zone causes Japan's devastating earthquakes. As the Pacific Plate grinds underneath, it builds stress that releases in megathrust quakes. The Japan Trench was the epicenter of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, where the seafloor ruptured along 300 miles, generating tsunamis that reached 130 feet tall. The pressure at the bottom exceeds 15,000 pounds per square inch. Almost nothing survives down there. Fact 9. Japan's coastline is longer than America's, despite being 25 times smaller. Japan's coastline stretches 18,486 miles, longer than the United States' 12,380 miles, despite Japan being just 145,000 square miles compared to America's 3.8 million. The extreme length comes from thousands of islands, deeply indented bays, and peninsulas, creating an impossibly convoluted shoreline. This is called the coastline paradox, and Japan is one of the most extreme examples on Earth. The long coastline shaped Japanese culture. Fishing villages dot every bay and inlet, and seafood dominates cuisine because almost nowhere is more than 90 miles from the ocean. But that same coastline made Japan vulnerable to tsunamis, with so many communities sitting at sea level in coastal valleys. Fact 8. Hokkaido gets more snow than anywhere else on Earth. Hokkaido's mountains receive over 60 feet of snow annually, the snowiest places on Earth. Cold Siberian air flows over the Sea of Japan, picks up moisture from the relatively warm water, then slams into Japan's mountains and dumps as snow. This lake effect process is so efficient that snow accumulates faster than anywhere else on the planet. Towns in Hokkaido have entrances on the second floor because the first floor gets buried every winter. The Tateyama-Kurobe Alpine Route has snow walls reaching 65 feet in spring. Workers carve through drifts taller than buildings, creating a canyon of white that towers over buses. Fact 7. Tokyo sits on reclaimed land that liquefies during earthquakes. Much of Tokyo Bay is reclaimed landfill, and during earthquakes, it liquefies. Shaking causes soil particles to lose contact, and solid ground temporarily turns to liquid. Buildings sink, tilt, or collapse even when earthquake resistant, because the ground itself has failed. Tokyo's Urayasu district, home to Tokyo Disneyland, experienced severe liquefaction in 2011. Roads buckled, manholes shot upward, buildings tilted as ground turned to mud. The waterfront areas where millions live are built on land that didn't exist 150 years ago, and that land is especially vulnerable to the megaquake seismologists say is overdue. Older buildings with shallow foundations will fail when it hits. Fact 6. Japan has active volcanoes in residential neighborhoods. Sakurajima sits across a bay from Kagoshima, a city of 600,000, and erupts almost daily, showering residents with volcanic ash. People check ash forecasts like weather reports, wear masks, carry umbrellas, and wash gray dust off their cars constantly. Sakurajima used to be an island until a 1914 eruption produced so much lava it filled the strait, connecting it to the mainland. The volcano erupts hundreds of times per year. Mount Aso in Kyushu holds the world's largest volcanic caldera, with people farming inside it while the central cone smokes constantly. Japan has 110 active volcanoes, and 50 are continuously monitored because eruptions could threaten populated areas. Fact 5. The Ryukyu Islands stretch from Japan to Taiwan. The Ryukyu Islands form a 650-mile arc from Kyushu to Taiwan, creating a geographic bridge between Japan and Southeast Asia. Okinawa is the largest, but the chain includes hundreds of islands with distinct cultures that are neither fully Japanese nor Chinese. They were an independent kingdom, the Ryukyu Kingdom, until Japan annexed them in 1879, and Okinawan language and genetics still show influences from China and Southeast Asia. The islands sit where the Philippine Sea Plate subducts beneath the Eurasian Plate. The southernmost island, Yonaguni, is just 67 miles from Taiwan. On clear days, you can see it from the cliffs. Fact 4. Japan's forests are artificial, planted to replace clear-cut ancient trees. Japan is 67% forested, but most are artificial cedar plantations planted after World War II. The government replanted clear-cut land with fast-growing cedar and created an environmental disaster. Cedar pollen triggers allergies in 40% of Japanese people, making spring miserable for millions. These monoculture forests don't support native biodiversity and are more vulnerable to landslides because cedar roots don't hold soil as well as native species. The timber was supposed to be profitable, but cheaper imports made it uneconomical. Millions of acres now sit economically useless. Only fragments of Japan's ancient forests survive in protected areas, some containing trees over 1,000 years old. Fact 3. Japan has an entire ghost island abandoned after coal mining ended. Hashima Island, Battleship Island, was one of the most densely populated places on Earth, with 5,000 people crammed onto a 16-acre rock. Entire families lived in concrete apartment blocks built to maximum density. When the coal ran out in 1974, everyone left within months. Today, it's a post-apocalyptic ruin. Empty windows, staircases to nowhere, trees growing from rooftops. Typhoons and salt spray have reduced structures to crumbling shells. Hashima represents Japan's boom and bust industrial history. Companies built entire communities around single resources, then walked away when they were exhausted. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, though walking on it is restricted because buildings could collapse at any moment. Fact 2. Aokigahara Forest at Mount Fuji's base is a suicide hotspot. Aokigahara Forest is known as Suicide Forest, Japan's most common suicide location, with dozens of bodies found annually. The forest is so dense that compasses malfunction due to magnetic iron deposits in volcanic rock, and visitors become disoriented within minutes of leaving marked trails. Thick moss muffles sound, and the dense canopy creates perpetual twilight. Authorities post signs encouraging people to reconsider and providing helpline numbers. The forest's dark association dates to a 1960s novel that depicted it as a suicide location, and it hasn't escaped that reputation since. Rangers conduct searches, but can't patrol all 14 square miles of woodland. Fact 1. Japan is sinking, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The Pacific Plate is dragging Japan downward as it subducts beneath the islands. The east coast is being pulled down 1 to 2 millimeters per year, while the west coast rises. Parts of Tokyo have already sunk over 15 feet since the early 1900s from groundwater extraction and the weight of buildings on reclaimed land. Add climate change, sea level rise to tectonic subsidence, and parts of Japan are losing ground to the ocean fast. Some coastal areas require constant pumping to keep seawater out. The long-term prognosis is bleak. Japan will keep sinking along the east coast as long as the Pacific Plate keeps moving, and no engineering can stop tectonic plates. Which fact about Japan's geography surprised you the most? Drop your answer in the comments, and subscribe for more geography that reveals how unstable our world really is.